Hey there, my friends. How are you doing today? I want to welcome each one of you to this incredible story that I'm about to share. Grab a seat, get comfortable, because what you're about to hear is a story of courage, sacrifice, and brotherhood that will touch your heart deeply. Today, I'm going to tell you about a combat medic, a young American soldier who, in the middle of the Afghan desert, faced an impossible choice that would test every fiber of his being. His name was Sergeant Ryan Mitchell, and what he did on that scorching afternoon in Helmand Province would become a legend among military medical personnel. This is a story about what it truly means to live by the code, leave no man behind, even when every instinct tells you to save yourself. So let's dive into this remarkable tale of heroism that happened during one of the most dangerous operations of the Afghanistan War. The sun was merciless over Helmand Province on August 14, 2011. Sergeant Ryan Mitchell wiped the sweat from his forehead as he checked his medical kit for the third time that morning. At 26 years old, this Army combat medic from small-town Kentucky had been deployed to Afghanistan for 8 months, but nothing could have prepared him for what was about to unfold. His unit, Bravo Company, 1st Battalion, 504th Parachute Infantry Regiment, had been tasked with clearing a Taliban stronghold in a village called Marja, known for its deadly network of IEDs and ambush points. Ryan had joined the army right after high school, driven by a desire to serve and save lives. His father had been a Vietnam veteran, a helicopter pilot who'd told him stories about the medics who ran into fire to pull wounded soldiers to safety. Those stories had planted a seed in young Ryan's heart. He wanted to be that person, the one who stood between his brothers and death. After completing his basic training at Fort Benning and his advanced medical training at Fort Sam Houston, he'd volunteered for deployment, eager to put his skills to use where they mattered most. The mission briefing that morning had been straightforward. Captain Davis, their commanding officer, had laid out the plan on a dusty map spread across a makeshift table at their forward operating base. The objective was to secure a compound suspected of housing Taliban fighters and weapons cache. Intelligence suggested moderate resistance, but in Helmand Province, intelligence was often wrong. What they didn't know was that the Taliban had been waiting for weeks, turning the entire area into a carefully orchestrated kill zone. Ryan moved with his squad through the narrow streets of Marja. The village seemed abandoned, doors hanging open, windows like empty eyes staring at the American soldiers. Specialist Torres walked point, his rifle sweeping left and right. Corporal Jackson covered their six. Private First Class Henderson, the youngest of the group at just 19, stayed close to Ryan, his hands trembling slightly on his M4 carbine. Ryan had noticed the kid's nervousness and had made it a point to keep him close, offering quiet words of encouragement when no one else could hear. "Stay sharp, everyone!" Lieutenant Morrison's voice crackled through their radios. "We're approaching the compound. Torres, Henderson, take the left flank. Jackson, Matthews, you're with me on the right. Mitchell, stay center, ready for casualties." Ryan nodded, even though the lieutenant couldn't see him. His hand instinctively went to his medical pouch, feeling the familiar shapes of tourniquets, hemostatic gauze, and morphine injectors. He'd used these supplies more times than he cared to remember, patching up brothers torn apart by bullets and shrapnel, holding their hands as helicopters screamed overhead to carry them to safety. The explosion that shattered the morning silence was massive. The lead Humvee, carrying 4 soldiers, hit an IED buried deep in the road. The blast flipped the 3-ton vehicle like a toy, sending debris and dust 50 feet into the air. Ryan's ears rang from the concussion as he instinctively dropped to the ground. The ambush began immediately. Machine gun fire erupted from 3 different positions, kicking up dirt and fragmenting the mud walls around them. "Contact! Contact!" someone screamed into the radio. Ryan's training took over. While his squad mates returned fire, he sprinted toward the burning Humvee, his medical bag bouncing against his hip. The vehicle was on its side, black smoke pouring from the engine. He could hear screaming from inside. "I need cover!" Ryan shouted. Corporal Jackson and 2 others laid down suppressing fire, their weapons chattering in controlled bursts. Ryan reached the Humvee and looked inside through the shattered window. What he saw made his stomach drop. All 4 men were alive but badly wounded. Sergeant Williams, the vehicle commander, had a piece of shrapnel embedded in his shoulder and was unconscious. Private Chen had a compound fracture in his leg, bone visible through torn flesh. Specialist Rodriguez was bleeding heavily from his abdomen, his hands pressed against the wound. The driver, Corporal Brooks, was trapped under the steering column, his face covered in blood from a head wound. The Taliban fire intensified. Bullets pinged off the Humvee's armor plating. Ryan made a split-second assessment. He couldn't treat them here. The vehicle could explode at any moment, and they were completely exposed. He keyed his radio with shaking hands. "This is Mitchell. I've got 4 wounded at the Humvee, critical condition. I need immediate casevac." Lieutenant Morrison's response came back through heavy static and gunfire. "Mitchell, casevac is 15 minutes out. Taliban has the LZ hot. You need to move them to the secondary extraction point." Ryan's blood turned to ice. The secondary extraction point was 400 meters to the east, through an area they'd been specifically warned about during the briefing. Intelligence had marked it as a suspected minefield planted by the Taliban months earlier. No one had cleared it. The safe route would take them north, adding another 20 minutes to the evacuation, but going through the minefield could cut the time in half, 20 minutes. Ryan looked at Rodriguez, whose face was growing pale, his hands slick with blood. Chen was going into shock from the leg injury. Williams still hadn't regained consciousness. Brooks was crying, pinned and terrified. 20 minutes might as well be 20 hours. They didn't have that kind of time. "Sir, the northern route will take too long," Ryan said into his radio, his voice surprisingly steady. "Rodriguez won't make it. I'm taking them through the eastern field." There was a long pause. Then Lieutenant Morrison's voice came back, quieter now. "Mitchell, that's a minefield, uncleared. You understand what you're saying?" "Yes, sir. I understand. But if I don't, these men die. I'm not leaving them behind." Another pause, then, "Godspeed, Sergeant. We'll keep the Taliban busy." Ryan didn't waste another second. He climbed into the smoking Humvee and began the agonizing process of extracting the wounded. First was Rodriguez, the most critical. Ryan packed the abdominal wound with hemostatic gauze, his hands working with practiced efficiency even as bullets cracked overhead. He applied pressure dressings, then grabbed Rodriguez under the arms and dragged him out of the vehicle. The specialist screamed in pain, but Ryan couldn't stop to comfort him. He pulled Rodriguez 20 feet from the Humvee and into a small crater, giving them minimal cover. Then he ran back for Chen. The private's broken leg made moving him excruciating. Ryan splinted it quickly with materials from his kit, then dragged Chen to join Rodriguez. 2 down, 2 to go. Williams was next. The unconscious sergeant was dead weight, easily 200 pounds of muscle and gear. Ryan's back screamed in protest as he hauled the man out of the vehicle and across the dirt. Sweat poured down his face, mixing with dust and forming mud on his skin. The Taliban fire was relentless, forcing him to move in short bursts between cover. Finally, Brooks. The driver was the hardest to extract. Ryan had to use a pry bar from the vehicle's emergency kit to lift the steering column enough to pull him free. Brooks sobbed with relief as Ryan dragged him to where the others lay. 4 wounded men, 400 meters to safety. And between them and survival lay a field that could erupt in deadly explosions with a single wrong step. Ryan looked at his squadmates, who were still engaged in the firefight, pinning down the Taliban positions. He couldn't ask them to help. This was his responsibility, his choice. He was the medic. These were his patients, his brothers. He'd sworn an oath to protect them, and he'd meant every word. He fashioned a makeshift litter from a poncho and 2 rifles, placing Rodriguez on it first. The specialist's breathing was shallow, his skin clammy. Ryan knew he had minutes, not hours. He grabbed the litter handles and began to pull, heading straight into the eastern field. The first 50 meters were the longest of Ryan's life. Every step could be his last. He moved slowly, deliberately, watching the ground for any sign of disturbance, any telltale wire or pressure plate. The litter dragged behind him, leaving a trail in the dust. Rodriguez groaned weakly but didn't open his eyes. When Ryan reached what he estimated was the halfway point, he carefully set Rodriguez down and ran back for Chen. The private was conscious, his eyes wide with fear and pain. "Doc, I can't feel my leg," he whispered. Ryan squeezed his shoulder. "You're going to be fine, brother. Stay with me." He repeated the agonizing process, pulling Chen's litter across the minefield, each step a prayer, each breath potentially his last. The weight of the litter combined with his medical gear and body armor made every meter feel like a mile. His legs trembled with exhaustion, but he couldn't stop. Behind him the firefight continued, his squad buying him precious time with their lives on the line. By the time Ryan went back for Williams, his hands were bleeding from gripping the litter handles. His shoulders felt like they were on fire. The sun beat down mercilessly and dehydration was setting in. But Williams needed him. Ryan grabbed the unconscious sergeant and began the third journey across the field. Halfway through, Ryan's boot came down on something that shifted beneath his weight. His heart stopped. He froze completely still, waiting for the explosion that would tear him apart. Seconds passed like hours. Nothing happened. It had been a rock, just a rock. Ryan exhaled shakily and kept moving, his entire body trembling, not just from exhaustion, but from the adrenaline of near death. When he laid Williams next to the others at the edge of the minefield, Ryan allowed himself 10 seconds to catch his breath. Just 10 seconds. Then he turned and ran back for Brooks one final time. The driver had lost a lot of blood from his head wound. Ryan had bandaged it as best he could, but Brooks was drifting in and out of consciousness. "Stay with me, Brooks," Ryan said as he positioned the litter. "You're almost home, brother. Almost home." The fourth crossing was the hardest. Ryan's body was running on pure willpower now. His vision blurred from exhaustion and dehydration. His legs barely responded to his commands. But he kept moving, one step at a time, pulling Brooks across the deadly ground. He was 30 meters from safety when he heard the click, the sound every soldier dreads. His foot had triggered something. An anti-personnel mine, probably a Soviet-era PMN, common in Afghanistan. Ryan had maybe half a second before it detonated. Instead of freezing, his combat training took over. He threw himself forward, pushing the litter with Brooks on it as hard as he could toward the safe zone. The mine exploded behind him, sending shrapnel and debris through the air. Ryan felt something hot tear into his left calf, but he didn't stop moving. He crawled the remaining meters, dragging Brooks with him, until they cleared the minefield's edge. "Medic down!" someone shouted. Ryan looked up to see friendly faces, members of his platoon who'd advanced to the extraction point. They grabbed the wounded, including Ryan himself. As the distinctive thump of helicopter rotors filled the air, a Black Hawk Casavac bird was descending, its door gunners laying down, covering fire. Ryan tried to stand, but his injured leg gave out. Corporal Jackson caught him. "You crazy son of a bitch," Jackson said, his eyes wet with tears. "You actually did it. You brought them all back." The evacuation happened in a blur. Medical personnel from the helicopter swarmed the wounded, starting IVs, administering emergency care. Ryan watched through fading consciousness as all 4 men were loaded onto the bird. Rodriguez was still alive, his chest rising and falling. Chen was conscious, giving a weak thumbs up. Williams had regained consciousness and was trying to speak. Brooks was crying, but he was alive. "Mitchell, you're going too," someone said. Ryan felt hands lifting him onto the helicopter. As the Black Hawk rose into the sky, leaving the firefight below, Ryan finally let himself believe they'd made it. All 5 of them. Against impossible odds, through a minefield under enemy fire, they'd survived. The flight to the field hospital at Camp Bastion took 23 minutes. During that time, the helicopter's medic worked on Ryan's leg wound, extracting shrapnel and packing the wound. It hurt like hell, but Ryan barely noticed. He was watching the others, making sure they were still breathing, still fighting. At Camp Bastion, doctors rushed all 5 men into surgery. Rodriguez's abdominal wound was severe, but the hemostatic packing Ryan had applied had slowed the bleeding enough to save his life. Chen's leg required multiple surgeries, but was saved from amputation. Williams recovered fully from his shoulder injury. Brooks needed reconstructive surgery on his face, but made a complete recovery. Ryan spent 3 days in the hospital before being transferred to Landstuhl Regional Medical Center in Germany. His calf wound would heal, leaving a scar that he'd carry for the rest of his life, a permanent reminder of that day in Maria. 6 weeks later, back at their base, a formation was called. The entire battalion assembled in the scorching Afghan heat. Ryan stood at attention, his leg still bothering him, but healing well. Lieutenant Morrison read from an official document as a full colonel stepped forward. For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty, Sergeant Ryan Mitchell is hereby awarded the Silver Star. The medal was pinned to his chest as his fellow soldiers erupted in applause. Rodriguez, Chen, Williams, and Brooks stood in the front row, all of them alive because one medic had refused to leave them behind. But for Ryan, the real reward came later that evening, when Rodriguez approached him at the mess hall. The specialist extended his hand, and when Ryan shook it, Rodriguez pulled him into a tight embrace. "You gave me a second chance at life, Doc," he said quietly. "I'll never forget that. None of us will." Now, my friends, let me take a moment to talk about what this story represents and why it's so important to remember. This is a dramatized narrative based on real events that occurred during the Afghanistan War, specifically during operations in Helmand Province between 2010 and 2012. While Sergeant Ryan Mitchell is a fictional character created for this story, his actions represent the very real heroism displayed by countless combat medics throughout American military history. The code, "Leave no man behind," is not just a motto, it's a sacred promise that military personnel make to each other. Combat medics, in particular, embody this principle in the most profound way. These brave men and women run toward danger when everyone else is running away, treating wounds under fire, making impossible decisions about who to save first, and often putting their own lives at risk to preserve the lives of their brothers and sisters in arms. During the Afghanistan War, which lasted from 2001 to 2021, combat medics faced unique challenges. The terrain was unforgiving, the enemy was skilled in asymmetric warfare, and improvised explosive devices, or IEDs, claimed thousands of lives and limbs. Helmand Province, where our story takes place, was one of the deadliest regions for coalition forces. According to military records from that period, medics in that area had some of the highest casualty rates among all military occupational specialties because they repeatedly exposed themselves to danger to reach wounded soldiers. The minefield scenario in this story reflects a very real danger that soldiers faced. The Taliban extensively used mines, both modern and Soviet-era devices left over from previous conflicts. These weapons were indiscriminate and cruel, designed to maim rather than kill, creating additional burdens for military units trying to evacuate casualties. What makes stories like this important, even when fictionalized, is that they help us understand the true cost of war and the extraordinary character of those who serve. These aren't Hollywood action heroes, they're real people, often very young, who face terror and make split-second decisions that define not just their own lives but the lives of everyone around them. The medical training that combat medics receive is intensive and comprehensive. They learn to perform emergency procedures under the worst possible conditions: limited supplies, no sterile environment, incoming fire, and patients with multiple traumatic injuries. The tourniquets, hemostatic gauze, and pressure dressings mentioned in this story are real medical tools that have saved countless lives on battlefields around the world. It's also important to understand the psychological toll this kind of experience takes on soldiers. Many medics who served in Afghanistan and Iraq returned home with post-traumatic stress disorder, not from injuries they sustained, but from the weight of the lives they tried to save and sometimes couldn't. The memories of holding a dying brother, of making triage decisions, of wondering if you did enough, these haunt many veterans long after they've left the battlefield. This story, while dramatized for narrative purposes, serves an educational purpose. It helps civilians understand what military service truly means, what sacrifice looks like in its rawest form. It honors the memory of all combat medics who've served, from the battlefields of World War II to the mountains of Afghanistan. These individuals represent the very best of humanity, the willingness to sacrifice oneself for others without hesitation. So as you reflect on Ryan Mitchell's story, remember that versions of it played out hundreds of times during the Afghanistan War. Real medics made real impossible choices. Real soldiers were pulled from burning vehicles, carried across dangerous terrain, and brought home to their families because someone refused to leave them behind. That's not fiction, that's history, that's honor, that's brotherhood. I hope this story touched your heart the way it touched mine when I researched and prepared it for you. These stories need to be told, these sacrifices need to be remembered, and these heroes, both real and representative, deserve our deepest respect and gratitude. Now, before we end, I want to hear from you. Tell me in the comments, what city or state are you watching this video from? I love knowing that this community spans across different places, all united by respect for these incredible stories of courage and sacrifice. Drop a comment. Let me know where you're tuning in from. And if this story moved you, if it made you think, if it gave you a new appreciation for what our military personnel go through, please hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and turn on notifications so you never miss another story. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, someone who would appreciate understanding what true heroism looks like. Thank you so much for watching, my friends. Thank you for taking the time to honor these stories with me. Sending a big hug to each and every one of you, no matter where you are. Until next time, take care, stay safe, and never forget the sacrifices made by those who serve. God bless, and see you in the next story.